The Grand Convocation hung in space like a massive jewel, its metal surface reflecting the light of 3 nearby stars. Inside the largest chamber, hundreds of alien beings gathered to witness something that had never happened before. Humanity was asking to join the Galactic Coalition, and the Council of Apex Representatives would decide their fate. Han Ji-won stood in the center of the circular room, her hands clasped behind her back. She was small compared to most creatures in the chamber. Her skin held no scales or armor. She had no claws, no fangs, no venom sacs. To the aliens watching her, she looked soft and weak. Some wondered why the humans had sent such a fragile representative. The council sat on raised platforms around her, each member representing the top predator from their home world. There was Keth, who looked like a bear made of steel and fury, with claws as long as human forearms. Beside him sat Ravesh, a reptilian creature with plates of natural armor covering her body and a tail that could crush stone. Further along the circle was Velik, an insectoid being with razor-sharp limbs and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Keth leaned forward, his massive frame making the metal platform groan. His voice rumbled through the translation devices everyone wore. "Human, we have reviewed your species application to join our coalition. We have questions." Ji-won nodded once, her face calm. "I expected you would. Every species in this coalition earned their place by proving they are the apex predator of their world," Keth continued. "We are the strongest, the fastest, the most deadly hunters our planets have produced. We see no such qualities in your kind." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Ji-won noticed several aliens shifting in what she had learned was their version of laughter. She didn't react. She had prepared for this. Ravesh spoke next, her voice hissing through sharp teeth. "Your species has no natural weapons. No claws to tear flesh, no fangs to deliver killing bites. Your skin tears easily. You cannot breathe underwater or survive in extreme cold without artificial protection. Tell us, human, why should we consider you equals?" "Your strength is unremarkable," added Velik, mandibles clicking. "We have measured human physical capabilities. You are weaker than 70% of coalition species. Your senses are limited. You see fewer colors than most of us. Your hearing range is narrow. You cannot detect electrical fields or sense vibrations through the ground." Ji-won listened to each criticism without interruption. She had heard similar doubts from her own people before they sent her here. Some humans wondered if they were making a mistake by reaching for the stars when so many other species seemed naturally superior. But Ji-won knew better. She had spent her life studying predators both on Earth and on the alien worlds humanity had visited. She understood something the council didn't yet grasp. "May I ask you all a question?" Ji-won said, her voice steady and clear. Keth waved a massive paw. "Speak. What does each of you hunt on your home world?" The question seemed to surprise them. Ravesh answered first. "I hunt the great horned beasts of my planet's plains. They are large and aggressive, with thick hides and sharp horns. We stalk them through tall grass and strike with precision." Velik clicked thoughtfully. "My kind hunts in swarms. We pursue flying prey through the forest canopy, overwhelming them with numbers and speed." Keth growled low. "I hunt alone, as my kind always has. We are strong enough to kill any creature we encounter. We need no pack, no tricks, only strength." Ji-won nodded slowly, her mind cataloging each answer. "And tell me, how long does a typical hunt last for each of you?" "Minutes," Ravesh said with pride. "If I cannot catch my prey within a short time, it escapes, and I must find new prey. This is the way of the hunt." "The same for us," Velik agreed. "A hunt is quick or it fails," Keth snorted. "I have never failed a hunt. But yes, the kill comes swiftly, I see," Ji-won said softly. Then she looked up at the council, meeting the eyes of each member in turn. "You asked me what makes humanity worthy of joining the apex predators. You asked why you should consider us equals when we have no claws, no armor, no venom." She paused, and in that moment, something changed in her expression. Her smile was small and knowing. It was the kind of smile that made several council members suddenly uncomfortable, though they couldn't explain why. "I could tell you the answer," Ji-won continued. "I could explain with words what makes humanity the apex predator of Earth. But I don't think you would truly understand. Words are not enough for this kind of truth." "Then what do you propose?" Keth demanded, irritation clear in his tone. "A demonstration," Ji-won said simply. "Give me 3 days in a controlled environment. Allow me to show you what human hunting really means. Let me prove what my species is." The council members looked at each other. Some seemed amused. Others appeared curious. A few looked skeptical. Ravesh leaned forward. What kind of demonstration? A hunt, Jiwan replied. In an arena of your choosing with terrain you design. You select volunteers from your own people, predators you trust. I will track them and capture them one by one, using only what a human naturally possesses in basic tools. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Many aliens clearly thought this was either a joke or a desperate bluff. Keth silenced them with a raised paw. You would hunt our people? You, a single human with no natural weapons, would attempt to capture trained predators from multiple worlds. His tone suggested he found the idea ridiculous. Yes, Jiwan said without hesitation. And if you fail? Velik asked. Then humanity withdraws its application and leaves the coalition alone, Jiwan answered. We will not ask again. But if she succeeds, came another voice. And Jiwan turned to see a sleek feline-like alien named Threx, speaking from the upper galleries. Then we must accept that humanity is what they claim to be. Silence fell over the chamber, as the weight of the proposal settled on everyone. This was no longer just a bureaucratic approval process. It had become a challenge, a test that would determine humanity's place among the stars. Keth looked around at his fellow council members, reading their reactions. Finally, he turned his gaze back to Jiwan. Very well, human. We accept your proposal. You will have your demonstration in 3 days. We will prepare an arena and select 3 volunteers. They will be given time to familiarize themselves with the environment before you enter. Thank you, Jiwan said, bowing her head slightly. Do not thank us yet, Ravesh warned. You may have just sentenced yourself to failure and humiliation. But Jiwan's small smile never wavered. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps quiet against the metal floor. As she left, the chamber burst into conversation. Aliens debated whether the human was brave or foolish. Some placed bets on how quickly she would fail. Others wondered what trick she might have planned. None of them understood yet. None of them realized that by accepting Jiwan's challenge, they had already made their first mistake. They had given a human time to prepare. And for a human, time was the most dangerous weapon of all. Jiwan returned to the human quarters aboard the station, her mind already working through the challenges ahead. The door slid open to reveal her team waiting inside. They had watched the council meeting through a live feed, and their faces showed a mixture of concern and determination. Kang Minho stood by the window, looking out at the stars. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. As a specialist in predator behavior, he had studied hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. He turned as Jiwan entered. 3 days isn't much time, he said quietly. It's enough, Jiwan replied, removing her formal jacket and sitting down at the central table. We knew they would test us. This is better than endless debates and political games. Park Yunji looked up from her data pad. She was compact and muscular, a former military officer who now analyzed alien combat strategies. I've been reviewing the species on the council. If they choose volunteers from their own ranks, we're looking at some serious opposition. Good, Jiwan said, and meant it. If we beat easy opponents, they'll dismiss it as luck. We need to face their best. Choi Dae-hyun, the team's cultural specialist, poured tea for everyone. He moved with careful precision, his movements thoughtful and measured. The question isn't whether you can succeed, Jiwan. We all know human capabilities. The question is whether they'll accept the truth when they see it. They will, Jiwan said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, because we're going to show them something they've never seen before. Something their evolution never prepared them for. Minho sat across from her. Walk us through your thinking. Jiwan took a sip of tea before answering. Every apex predator in that chamber evolved the same way. They developed physical advantages. Strength, speed, armor, venom, camouflage. Their bodies became weapons, and that's how they survived. But not humans, Yunji said, nodding slowly. Not humans. Jiwan confirmed. We evolved differently. Our ancestors couldn't outrun the prey animals on the African plains. They couldn't overpower them with strength. They had no venom to kill from a distance, no claws to tear through hide. So they developed something else, Dae-hyun added. Intelligence. Tool use, cooperation. And endurance, Minho said, leaning forward. Persistence hunting. That's what you're planning to demonstrate, isn't it? Jiwan smiled. Partially. But it's more than that. These aliens need to understand what it means to be hunted by a human. They need to experience it. She stood and walked to the wall screen, pulling up images from Earth's history. The team had compiled extensive documentation of human evolution and hunting practices. "Look at this," she said, pointing to an image of ancient humans tracking across a savanna. "Our ancestors would identify an animal in the morning. Then they would follow it. Not chase it, just follow. The animal would run away, fast and panicked. But humans would keep walking, following the tracks. The animal would stop to rest," Minho continued, picking up the explanation. "It would think it was safe. Then the humans would appear again, still walking, still following. The animal would run again, and again, and again," Yunji said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "For hours, for days sometimes, until the animal's body gave out," Jiwon finished, "until it was so exhausted it couldn't run anymore. Then the humans would walk up to it and make the kill. No chase, no fight, just inevitable, relentless pursuit." Daehyun set down his teacup. "The aliens won't expect that. They're ambush predators or pack hunters. Their hunts are explosive and brief. They've never encountered something that just doesn't stop." "Exactly," Jiwon said. "And there's more. We're going to show them tool use, tactical thinking, and adaptation. By the end of 3 days, they'll understand what makes humans different." The team spent the next several hours planning. Minho pulled up files on likely volunteers, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. Yoonji worked out tactical approaches for different terrain types. Daehyun researched the psychological impact of persistence hunting on prey species. Meanwhile, throughout the station, other conversations were taking place. In the alien quarters, 3 volunteers had been selected for the demonstration. They gathered in a private room, confident and somewhat amused by the whole situation. Vex was a Talarian, built for speed and precision. His species had evolved as pursuit predators, capable of incredible bursts of velocity. He stood on 2 powerful legs, his body covered in sleek scales that reduced air resistance. "This will be over quickly," he said, his voice sharp and quick. "I've never been caught by anything that couldn't match my speed." Thornback came from a heavy gravity world. He was massive, covered in thick armor plates that had evolved to protect against the crushing gravity of his home. "The human is soft," he rumbled. "She will break herself trying to catch us. I will find a good hiding spot and wait. She will never move me." Skriel said nothing, but her body rippled with colors, a sign of amusement in her species. She was amphibious, equally at home in water or on land. Her skin secreted a mild poison, and her senses could detect the slightest vibration in air or water. She had never been successfully hunted on her world. The 3 volunteers toured the arena that was being prepared. It was a massive biodome, kilometers across, with varied terrain. There were forests, open plains, rocky areas, and a substantial lake. The environment was designed to give each volunteer natural advantages. "I'll take the forest," Vex decided. "Dense cover, multiple escape routes. I can move through the canopy faster than she can track on the ground." "The rocks for me," Thornback said. "Plenty of places to hide, and the terrain will slow her down." "I'll use the lake and the marshlands near it," Skriel added. "She cannot follow where I can swim." They made their plans with confidence. None of them had studied humans carefully. They knew the basic facts, the ones that made humans seem weak. They didn't know the deeper truths. Back in the human quarters, Jiwon was making her own preparations. She requested specific equipment, all simple and primitive. A water container, basic rope made from plant fibers, simple cutting tools, a fire-starting kit, warm clothing, and a waterproof layer. "No weapons?" Hyunji asked, reviewing the list. "Humans are the weapon," Jiwon replied. "Everything else is just an extension of human capability." Minho studied the arena layout. "They'll separate, each to terrain that suits them. Vex will go high and fast. Thornback will bunker down. Skriel will use the water." "Let them," Jiwon said calmly. "It doesn't matter where they hide or how they prepare. The outcome is already determined." Daehyun looked at her curiously. "You sound very certain." "I am," Jiwon said, "because they're thinking like prey animals trying to escape. They're not thinking like humans. They don't understand that for a human, the hunt isn't about the first encounter. It's about the last one." On the second day, word of the upcoming demonstration had spread throughout the station. Aliens from dozens of species made bets on the outcome. Most bet against the human. Some wagered on how quickly she would give up. A few wondered if she would be injured in the attempt. Only a handful of beings, mostly those who had spent time studying Earth, remained quiet. They had read the histories. They had seen the archaeological evidence. They knew something the others didn't. Humans had never been prey. Not really, not even when they were small and weak by galactic standards. They had always been hunters. They had just hunted in a way no other species did. On the third day, as the demonstration hour approached, Ji-won stood in the preparation room. Her team had done everything they could. Now it was up to her to prove what humanity was. Minho clasped her shoulder. Remember, you're not just doing this for the coalition. You're showing them who we are. What we've always been. I know, Ji-won said softly. She looked at each of her team members. When this is over, everything changes. They'll never see us the same way again. Good, Yoonji said firmly. Let them see the truth. The door opened and an attendant announced it was time. Ji-won walked toward the arena entrance, her steps steady and sure. She carried her simple equipment, looking almost inadequate compared to the prepared hunters waiting inside. But as she stepped through the entrance, something shifted in her posture. Her eyes sharpened. Her breathing became measured and controlled. This was no longer a diplomat or a scientist, this was a human. And the hunt was about to begin. The biodome stretched out before Ji-won like a miniature world. Artificial sunlight filtered through the transparent ceiling high above, creating shadows and light just like on a natural planet. She stood at the entrance, taking in every detail with calm attention. The viewing platforms above were packed with spectators. Hundreds of aliens had come to watch the human fail. Their voices created a dull roar that echoed through the dome. Ji-won ignored them. They didn't matter right now. The announcement system crackled to life. The demonstration will now begin. 3 volunteers are positioned in the arena. The human has 72 hours to capture all 3. Capture is defined as restraining the volunteer so they cannot escape without assistance. Ji-won didn't move immediately. She stood perfectly still, eyes scanning the terrain. The others were already somewhere in that vast space, confident and hidden. They thought they were hunting her, or at least avoiding her. They were wrong. The hunt had already started the moment she stepped through the door. She began walking, not rushing, just moving with steady purpose. Her first task wasn't to find prey. It was to understand the environment. She walked through the grassland near the entrance, feeling the ground beneath her feet. She knelt and touched the soil, noting its moisture. She checked the wind direction with a wet finger. In the viewing area, some aliens laughed. "What is she doing?" one asked loudly. "Looking for insects?" But a few watchers stayed quiet. They saw something the others missed. The human wasn't lost or confused. She was learning. Ji-won spent the first 2 hours exploring a large section of the dome. She found water sources, identified plant types, and noted animal tracks left by the small creatures that had been introduced to make the environment realistic. She wasn't looking for the volunteers yet. She was building a mental map. High in the forest canopy, Vex watched her through the leaves. He was puzzled by her behavior. "She moves like prey," he muttered to himself. "Slow and cautious. This will be easy." He didn't understand that slow and cautious was exactly how humans had conquered their world. By midday, Ji-won had established a base camp near the water source. She gathered wood and built a small fire. She filled her water container and boiled it, even though the water was clean. The aliens watching didn't understand why. They didn't know that for humans, every action had multiple purposes. Boiling water wasn't just about safety. The fire would serve other uses later. She ate some of the rations she'd brought, taking her time. She rested for exactly 20 minutes, then stood and began tracking in earnest. Vex had left traces. He was fast, yes, but speed creates disturbances. Broken twigs in the canopy, scratches on bark where his claws had gripped. Ji-won found these signs and followed them patiently. She didn't try to move as fast as Vex. She didn't need to. The Talarian realized he was being tracked around the 4th hour. He saw the human below moving steadily through the forest, eyes on the trees. "Impossible," he hissed. I left no trail, but he had. Every creature leaves a trail. Vex just wasn't used to prey that could read it. He decided to run, using his superior speed to put distance between himself and the human. He raced through the trees, covering kilometers in minutes. Then he stopped, certain he had escaped. Ji-won kept walking. She found where he had stopped, saw the marks of his landing, and continued following. Her pace never changed. Walk, observe, follow. Walk, observe, follow. Hours passed. The artificial sun began its programmed descent toward evening. Vex had run and hidden 3 more times. Each time, the human found his trail and followed. She never rushed. She never seemed tired. That was when Vex began to feel something he had never experienced before. Unease. The human was always there, always coming, never stopping. It was like being followed by the tide or the sun crossing the sky. Inevitable. This is wrong, Vex said to himself, his confidence cracking. Predators don't do this. They chase or they give up. But humans did neither. They just continued. By nightfall, Vex was genuinely worried. He had been moving all day, burning energy with his explosive speed. He was tired and he needed to rest. But every time he stopped, within an hour or two, he would see the human appear, walking steadily, always on his trail. G1 had prepared for the night. She wore clothing that kept her warm as the temperature dropped. She had her fire skills and her camp knowledge. She could rest in shifts, sleeping for short periods while remaining alert. This was something humans had done for thousands of years. Vex had no such preparation. His species was diurnal. They slept deeply at night because they had never needed to do otherwise. As exhaustion pulled at him, he climbed high into a tree and tried to sleep. But his sleep was broken, anxious. Every sound made him twitch awake. Was that the human? Was she still coming? She was. The second day dawned, and Vex was already exhausted. He had barely slept. His muscles ached from constant running. When he looked down from his tree, he saw smoke rising from a small fire below. The human was there, calmly eating breakfast, apparently well rested. It was impossible. It was terrifying. Vex ran again, but his speed was diminished. His body was reaching its limits. By midday, he couldn't maintain his fastest pace anymore. He was reduced to jogging, then to walking, then to staggering. G1 maintained her steady pace. She drank water regularly. She ate small amounts often. She paced herself because humans understood endurance better than any other species. They had evolved for it. In the viewing areas, the laughter had stopped. Aliens watched in growing silence as they understood what they were seeing. This wasn't a chase. This was something much older and more primal. This was persistence hunting, and none of them had ever witnessed it before. She's not trying to catch him quickly, Minho explained to some observers who had asked questions. She's waiting for his body to fail. Humans can regulate their temperature through sweating. We can maintain steady exertion for days. Most predators can't. They're built for explosive power, not endurance. But that's cruel, one alien protested. She's torturing him. No, Minho replied quietly. She's hunting him. This is what apex predators do. By the evening of the second day, Vex was finished. He had found himself in a canyon, his choices for escape limited. He was so tired he could barely think. When G1 appeared at the canyon entrance, he didn't even try to run. She approached slowly, her movements calm and non-threatening now that the hunt was over. She spoke softly, though Vex barely heard the words through his exhaustion. It's done. You can rest now. Using her rope, she carefully secured his limbs, not roughly but firmly. She even gave him water from her container. The capture was complete. Medical staff entered the dome to retrieve Vex. He was placed on a stretcher, his body completely depleted. As they carried him out, he looked back at G1 one last time. The human met his eyes, and in that moment Vex understood. He hadn't been defeated by strength or speed. He had been defeated by something far more terrifying. Patience. In the viewing areas, the atmosphere had completely changed. The casual mockery was gone. Aliens who had bet against the human were very quiet. Those who understood what they had just witnessed looked at G1 with new eyes. But the demonstration wasn't over. 2 more volunteers remained. G1 returned to her camp and prepared for the next hunt. She cleaned her equipment, ate a proper meal, and rested for several hours. She showed no signs of the triumph some had expected. For her, this was simply work. This was what humans did. Thornback, watching from his hiding place in the rocks, felt a chill run through his armored body. He had witnessed Vex's capture. He had seen how the human simply refused to stop. I am stronger, he told himself. I can wait her out. My armor protects me. She cannot harm me. But deep in his instincts, in the ancient parts of his brain that remembered what it meant to be prey, Thornback felt something stir. It was a feeling his species hadn't experienced in millions of years. It was fear. G1 finished her rest and stood. She looked toward the rocky area where Thornback was hidden. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there. She had found his tracks earlier, identified his preferred terrain. She began walking in that direction, her pace steady and measured. The hunt was beginning again, and this time the whole station was watching in silence. Thornback had chosen his position carefully. The rocky terrain was harsh and unforgiving, full of caves and crevices where his massive armored body could wedge itself. He had found a cave that was perfect for defense, with a narrow entrance and a wide interior. He could see anyone approaching, and his thick armor made him nearly impossible to force out. "Let the human come," he rumbled to himself. "I can wait here for days. She cannot move me. She cannot harm me. This position is unbreakable." He was thinking like a fortress. Humans thought like siege engineers. Jiwan approached the rocky area as the third day began. She had rested well after capturing Vex, and her mind was sharp. She studied the terrain from a distance, noting the countless hiding places. She could spend weeks searching every cave and crevice. That wasn't the human way. Instead, she began to think, where would a heavily armored creature from a high-gravity world feel most comfortable? He would want weight above him, stability around him. He would choose defense over mobility. She narrowed her search to the most defensible positions and began investigating each one systematically. But she didn't rush. She explored the area methodically, and as she did, she collected materials: dry wood, certain types of plants, green branches that would produce thick smoke when burned. The aliens watching didn't understand yet. They saw her gathering resources and wondered what possible use they could be. Thornback saw her moving through his territory and felt satisfied. She was searching blindly, wasting time and energy. He was hidden perfectly. Even if she came near his cave, he could simply retreat deeper. She couldn't follow him into the tight spaces where his armor scraped against stone. What Thornback didn't understand was that Jiwan wasn't trying to find him by searching every cave. She was eliminating possibilities and learning the terrain. More importantly, she was preparing. On the third day, as afternoon approached, Jiwan made her move. She had narrowed down Thornback's location to 3 possible caves. All were well protected, perfect for defense. So she would make defense meaningless. She started with the first cave. She gathered her materials and built a fire at its entrance. But this was not a cooking fire. She piled on green wood and damp moss, creating thick, choking smoke. Then she used her tools to direct the smoke into the cave entrance. The cave was empty, but that didn't matter. She moved to the second location and did the same thing. More smoke billowing into the darkness. Anyone inside would have to come out or suffocate, still empty. That left one cave. Thornback smelled the smoke before he saw it. At first he didn't understand. Then thick gray smoke began rolling into his cave and sudden panic hit him. His eyes began to water. His breathing became difficult. The smoke was everywhere, filling the cave, leaving no room for clean air. He had 2 choices: stay and suffocate or leave his perfect defensive position. He chose to live. Coughing and struggling, he pushed himself through the narrow entrance. His armor scraped against the rocks as he emerged into the open air, his eyes streaming, his lungs burning. Jiwan was waiting. She had positioned herself upwind of the smoke, far enough to be safe but close enough to see. When Thornback emerged, disoriented and weakened by the smoke, she was ready. She didn't try to fight him directly. That would be foolish. Instead, she had prepared a trap. Near the cave entrance, she had dug a pit and covered it with branches and dirt. It wasn't deep enough to hurt him, but it was deep enough for his heavy body to fall into, and the sides were too steep and smooth for his legs to find purchase. Thornback, blinded by tears and desperate for clean air, stumbled directly into it. His massive weight crashed through the covering and he fell into the pit. He roared in fury and surprise, thrashing and trying to climb out, but Jiwan had learned from studying his species. She knew his armor was strong, but his joints were vulnerable. She knew his size made him powerful, but also made him slow. She used her rope to create a net, dropping it over him from above. His struggles only tangled him further. She didn't approach until he was completely exhausted from fighting. Then she climbed down carefully and secured the net. She spoke to him calmly, her voice steady. "Your armor is impressive. Your strength is remarkable. But strength means nothing if your opponent chooses not to meet it directly." Thornback stared at her, his mind struggling to understand. He had been beaten not by superior force but by strategy, by tools, by the simple use of smoke and a pit, things so basic that his species had never developed defenses against them. "How?" he gasped. "How did you know where I was?" "I didn't," Jiwan admitted. "Not exactly. But I understood how you think. I narrowed the possibilities and forced you to reveal yourself. That's what humans do. We don't just react. We plan. Medical staff retrieved Thornback, pulling him from the pit with equipment designed for heavy lifts. As they carried him away, he looked at the simple trap that had defeated him. Sticks, rope, a hole in the ground. Nothing special. Nothing that required advanced technology or natural weapons, just intelligence. The viewing galleries were completely silent now. 2 volunteers had been captured, and both defeats had been absolute. The methods were different, but the principle was the same. The human didn't win through superior physical abilities. She won by thinking several steps ahead. Keth, the council leader, watched with his massive paws clenched. Something cold was settling in his chest. Understanding. The human hadn't even used violence. She had simply been smarter, more patient, and more adaptable than her opponents. There's still one more, Ravesh said quietly beside him. Skriel is in the water. The human cannot follow there. But both of them were beginning to wonder if that would matter. In the dome, Jiwan returned to her camp and rested again. She was tired now, truly tired. 2.5 days of constant activity were taking their toll. But she had managed her energy carefully. She had slept in shifts, eaten regularly, stayed hydrated. She could continue. Skriel watched from beneath the water of the lake. She had witnessed both captures, and unlike her companions, she was not comforting herself with false confidence. The human was dangerous. Not physically, but in ways that were harder to defend against. Still, Skriel had advantages. She could breathe underwater. She could sense vibrations through the water. Her camouflage made her nearly invisible even in clear water. The human would have to enter the lake to catch her, and once in the water, the human would be at every disadvantage. Or so Skriel thought. Jiwan spent several hours observing the lake. She walked its perimeter, studying the depth, the clarity, the plant life. She noted where streams fed into it and where water drained away. She watched for disturbances on the surface. Then she did something unexpected. She began building a weir, a simple trap for fish. She used rocks and sticks to create a funnel shape in the shallow water near the shore. Any fish or creature following the current would be guided into the trap. But this wasn't just for catching fish. It was a message. Skriel saw the construction and understood immediately. The human was telling her that even in the water she wasn't safe. The human could manipulate the aquatic environment just as she had manipulated the land. For the first time, Skriel felt true concern. She retreated to the deepest part of the lake where the human couldn't possibly reach. She would wait there. The human couldn't hold her breath long enough to dive that deep. Jiwan finished her weir and then did something that surprised everyone. She gathered materials and began building a simple raft. It took hours, binding wood together with rope, testing its balance, making it stable. The work was careful and methodical. When night fell, Jiwan slept on the shore, her raft completed and ready. She had been awake for most of 3 days, and even human endurance had limits. She needed real rest before the final confrontation. In the viewing galleries, speculation ran wild. How could the human possibly catch Skriel in deep water? What was her plan? Minho, watching from the human observation area, smiled slightly. She's already won, he said to Unji and Daehyun. How? Unji asked. Skriel can stay underwater indefinitely. True, Minho agreed. But she has to eat. She has to move. And every moment she stays in that lake, Jiwan is learning about her, preparing, planning. Time isn't Skriel's ally. It's Jiwan's weapon. As the 4th day dawned, Jiwan woke refreshed. She ate breakfast, checked her equipment, and pushed her raft into the water. She had fashioned a simple paddle and a long pole for testing depth. She began to move across the lake, not randomly, but in a pattern. She was herding, using sound and movement to drive Skriel toward specific areas. She was turning the entire lake into a trap, restricting options, creating pressure. She had made a spear from a straight branch and sharpened stone. She had woven a net from plant fibers. Skriel felt the trap closing and knew she had to act. She couldn't stay in the water forever, not with the human controlling the surface. She would have to emerge, and when she did, the human would be waiting. The final confrontation was approaching, and everyone watching knew it. The question was no longer if Jiwan would succeed. It was how. Skriel lasted another day before exhaustion and hunger forced her to make a mistake. She had been in the water for nearly 4 days, and while her species could survive that long, it wasn't comfortable. The human had made the lake hostile through constant activity. The raft moved back and forth, creating vibrations that disrupted Skriel's senses. The nets were everywhere in the shallow areas. When Skriel finally surfaced near the edge of the lake, desperate for easier prey than the deep-water fish, Jiwan was ready. She had predicted the most likely emergence point based on current patterns and food sources. Her spear was already in motion before Skriel fully breached the surface. The throw was perfect. Humans had evolved shoulders specifically for throwing, a unique adaptation among Earth's creatures. The spear flew straight and true, and though Skriel dodged with incredible reflexes, the net came next. Jiwan had tied it to release from above, and it fell over Skriel like a blanket. In the water, tangled in fibers and shocked by the speed of the attack, Skriel couldn't escape. Jiwan pulled her to shore with steady effort, hand over hand, using leverage instead of pure strength. By the time Skriel reached the bank, she was completely captured. The amphibious hunter looked up at the human standing over her. "You came into my element," Skriel said, her voice bubbling with disbelief. "You cannot breathe water. You have no fins, yet you still caught me." "I didn't need to breathe water," Jiwan replied, kneeling beside her. "I just needed to understand it. That's what humans do. We adapt, we learn, we overcome." Medical staff arrived for the final time, carefully releasing Skriel from the net and checking her for injuries. There were none. Jiwan had been precise, capturing without harming. As Skriel was carried away, the entire station seemed to hold its breath. The demonstration was complete. All 3 volunteers had been captured within the time limit. The human had done exactly what she promised. The silence in the viewing galleries was profound. Then slowly noise began to build. Not mockery this time. Something else, respect, fear, understanding. Jiwan returned to the entrance of the dome, tired but steady. She had proven her point. Now came the harder part, explaining what it meant. The council reconvened in the main chamber. Jiwan stood before them again, but the atmosphere was completely different from 5 days ago. The council members looked at her with new eyes. She was no longer a curiosity or a joke. She was something that made ancient instincts stir in their minds. Keth spoke first, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. "You have completed your demonstration. You captured 3 trained predators using methods we did not anticipate. The council must deliberate on what this means." "If I may," Jiwan said, stepping forward. "I would like to explain what you witnessed, not to boast, but to help you understand what humanity truly is." Ravesh gestured for her to continue. "Speak human. We are listening now." Jiwan took a breath and began. "Every species in this council became an apex predator through physical evolution. You grew stronger, faster, more armored. Your bodies became weapons. This is the path most predators follow." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Humans evolved differently. We come from a world rich with megafauna, creatures much larger and stronger than us. We couldn't outrun them. We couldn't overpower them. By all logic, we should have remained prey. Yet you survived," Velik said quietly. "We did more than survive," Jiwan replied. "We became the dominant species on our planet. And we did it through a different kind of evolution. Our bodies remained relatively weak, but our minds grew powerful." She began to pace slowly, her words clear and measured. "Humans developed persistence hunting. We would track prey for hours, for days if necessary. Our bodies evolved to regulate heat through sweating, allowing us to maintain steady activity when other predators had to rest. We could literally run our prey to death through pure endurance." Keth shifted uncomfortably. He had witnessed exactly this with Vex. "But endurance was just the beginning," Jiwan continued. "Humans developed tool use far beyond any other species on Earth. We turned sticks into spears, stones into hammers. We controlled fire, using it for warmth, cooking, and hunting. We built shelters, made clothing, created containers for water." She gestured to the viewing screens where recordings of her demonstration played. "You saw me use smoke to force Thorn back from his cave. Fire is so fundamental to human existence that we barely think about it. But to most prey animals, fire is terrifying. We turned that terror into a tool." "And the nets, the traps, the weir in the lake," Ravesh added, understanding dawning. All tools, Jiwan confirmed. "Humans don't face problems directly when indirect solutions are more effective. We don't fight fair. We use terrain, timing, and tactics. We prepare, we plan, we adapt." She stopped pacing and faced the council directly. "But the most important human trait isn't physical at all. It's cognitive. Humans can imagine future scenarios. We can plan multiple steps ahead. We can predict behavior based on understanding how creatures think." "You predicted where each of us would be," came a weak voice. Vex had returned to the chamber, recovered enough to speak. You knew how we would react before we did? I studied your species, G1 said simply. I learned what you value, how you think, what makes you comfortable or afraid. That's human intelligence. We don't just react to the world. We understand it, model it in our minds, and act based on that understanding. Yunji stepped forward from the observation area. May I add something? At Keth's nod, she continued. What you witnessed was a single human engaged in hunting. Now imagine what humans can do in groups. We cooperate at a level that surpasses almost any other species. We share knowledge across generations. We build on what others have learned. Daehyun joined her. Human civilization exists because we adapted our environment to suit us, rather than adapting ourselves to the environment. We changed our world. We domesticated other species, turning predators into companions and prey into livestock. We didn't just survive alongside other apex predators. We made them serve us. Minho pulled up holographic images from Earth. Humans crossed ice ages, colonized every continent, survived in deserts and jungles and frozen tundras. We went to environments where we had no natural advantages and thrived anyway, through tools, cooperation, and intelligence. The council watched the images in silence. They saw human history unfolding. Primitive hunters tracking mammoths, early civilizations building cities, industrial societies reshaping entire landscapes. They saw humans in spacesuits on the moon, humans in submarines in the deepest oceans, humans in every extreme environment Earth offered. You asked what makes humanity worthy of joining the apex predators. Jiwon said, her voice firm. The answer is that we already are apex predators. We've been apex predators for thousands of years. We just achieved it differently than you did. Keth leaned forward. But you seem so harmless. When you first stood before us, we saw no threat. Jiwon's smile was small and knowing. That's part of what makes humans effective. We learned to hide our predatory nature because it made hunting easier. We developed social behaviors that seem friendly and cooperative. We smile, showing our teeth, which should be a threat display. But we made it seem welcoming instead. She raised her hand, palm forward, fingers spread. The gesture that the title had promised. This hand has no claws, no venom glands. It looks harmless, but this hand can grip a spear and throw it with deadly accuracy. This hand can tie complex knots, build intricate tools, write languages, perform surgery, or pull a trigger. She turned her hand, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. This hand built cities and spacecraft. It painted art and composed music. It also crafted weapons of incredible destructive power. The same dexterity that creates can also destroy. That's humanity. We are capable of both, and that duality is what makes us truly dangerous. The chamber was absolutely silent. Every being present was contemplating the implications of what they had learned. Thornback spoke, his voice still rough from the smoke. You could have killed us during the hunt. You had opportunities, of course, Jiwon agreed, but that wasn't the point. I wanted to show you what humans can do, not how violent we can be. Any predator can kill. The question is whether you can hunt with precision, with control, with purpose. Skriel's colors shifted to a pattern none of the humans recognized. Later they learned it meant profound respect. You are more dangerous than any of us realized. You hide it well. We don't hide it, Jiwon corrected gently. We simply don't lead with it. Humans prefer cooperation to conflict. We prefer to build rather than destroy. But when necessary, when survival requires it, we remember what we are. We remember that our ancestors walked out of Africa with nothing but stone tools and inherited the entire world. She looked around at each council member. You asked if humanity deserves to join the coalition. I ask you, can you afford not to include us? We're already here, already exploring the stars. The question isn't whether humans are apex predators. The question is whether the galaxy is ready to acknowledge what that means. Keth sat back heavily. He looked at his fellow council members and saw his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They had made assumptions based on human appearance. They had judged humans by the standards of physical predation. They had been completely wrong.